Welcome to teleSUR English once again. We go live to Venezuela at this moment as a demonstration is underway in the city of Caracas. Let's look at the live images at this moment. The demonstration is demanding the freedom and the return of all the children that are currently being kidnapped abroad, specifically by the government of the U.S. We are looking at the current act that is underway in this mobilization for the freedom of the children.
Well, my name is Zambrano, and I am a grandmother of a girl that is still kidnapped in the United States. And I want to thank you all, and I want to congratulate the families that receive their children today, and we need to support our government to achieve the rescue of our families. As President Maduro said, till the last child we will see coming here to the Venezuelan land, and we are very happy, and we are still struggling for the children kidnapped, and we will just sing that, it is a crime to violate human rights. It is a crime to persecute innocent people and kidnapping children. But immigration is not a crime. That's why we are going to listen to the project group. Raise your hands for our children.
Looking at the images of the ongoing march, the ongoing rally that is underway in Venezuela as the people are continue to demand the return of all those kidnapped, and particularly the return of the children that have been separated from their families after migrating. Migration is not a crime was the voices of one of the speakers at that moment, highlighting the ongoing persecution that the U.S. administration in particular is having on the Venezuelan migrants that have been kidnapped, illegally detained, and in many cases, these children have been separated from their families. We're looking at live images at this moment as the rally is ongoing, a rally that demands for the freedom, the return of these children. We were just seeing moments ago that in a new return to the homeland plan, a set of 5 children, boys and girls, came back home. They are about to be reunited with their families. They were received by the Minister of the Interior, Justice and Peace, Diosdado Cabello, also by National Assembly member Cilia Flores. They were received by the Venezuelan authorities, as every return to the homeland plan has been welcomed by the authorities to their homeland, to their country, and they were now going to be reunited with these families. But the demand continues, and the claims for every boy and girl abroad illegally detained and separated from their family members in Venezuela continues in an effort for the U.S. administration to finally return them, respect their rights as migrants, and allow for the Venezuelan government to bring them back to their homeland, to Venezuela. This is the rally that we're looking at this moment. The rally is ongoing as they have been. This has been a permanent topic. Let's recall also that Venezuela is days away from a new election, a mayoral and municipal election in this case. And even in the election campaign, this topic of continuing to ask for, demand the return of all the children, the reunification of the family has been an ongoing topic led by the campaign leaders as well. We've been seeing throughout the week how Jorge Rodriguez was leading these denunciations and the importance of listening to those words, listening to these family members, these mothers, these aunts and uncles who are waiting for the children to come back. Let's listen to some more of these family members.
So let's sing migrate is not a felony, it's not a crime. Once again.
Migration is not a felony, it's not a crime. Those are the words that are coming from stage, those are the words that are being echoed by the Venezuelan citizens who have gathered in the streets in support of this nationwide claim, a claim that has also reunited different sectors in Venezuela, all of them asking for these nationals to be brought back to their homeland, to be allowed to return, respecting their rights. The fact that migrating by itself cannot be persecuted as a crime. There have been many denunciations of procedures that have not followed the legal ways, people that have been targeted without committing any sort of crimes, even people that had every paper in order and have still been targeted, children that have been picked up from schools and people from their working centers in the United States as the Trump administration came to office with one reason, and he had promised it in the campaign and vowed to deliver from the first moment to increased persecution of migration, and this has targeted in particular Venezuelan citizens. Many denunciations speak of illegal procedures, also of false claims, for example, linking any Venezuelan migrant to the defunct Tren de Aragua criminal organization. And even as U.S. reports showed that there was no evidence in many of these cases of any crime or wrongdoing, many citizens were targeted. One of the main procedures that is being constantly denounced in the face of the international community also has to do with the illegal sending of the Venezuelan citizens to a third-party prison, third-party country like El Salvador, where they are being detained in inhumane conditions at the Secot Center that was widely known in the region as a center with concentration camp-like conditions, and that is where the U.S. administration, following no legal procedure, sent these migrants that in many cases had never even been to El Salvador and of course had committed no crime in that country. So in this context, in the context of Venezuela that continues to maintain its demand for its nationals to be treated correctly, for their human rights to be respected, and for all the children who have been separated from their families to return back home, in this context is that Venezuelan men and women take to the streets to support this demand. We continue looking at the images. Of this rally that is underway in Venezuela. Let's recall that it's been one of the main topics of all Venezuelan authorities and being led by the President Nicolás Maduro, the campaign and the political will to bring back all the nationals. The Return to the Homeland plan was a government plan initiated to repatriate many Venezuelans that migrated, in many cases hoping for a better future, but who found mistreatment and found even harsher conditions, being met with inhumane treatment and disrespect of their human rights abroad. So the Return to the Homeland plan is the official way that the Venezuelan government has to continue to fight for its nationals, even those who had decided to continue their lives abroad. Over 8,000 Venezuelans have returned to their country in this way through the government plan. And in the last month, the plan entered a new stage when, following the negotiations, the conversations with the U.S. representative in the country, the government opening lines of dialogue, managed to reinstate a series of flights specifically designed to bring back the Venezuelan nationals in the United States. This has been a process of ongoing negotiation and ongoing denunciation at the same time. Venezuelan authorities have maintained it, and the images that we are looking at this moment show that it is also a popular demand. It is a popular demand that is being echoed from the authorities to the people and back to the mandate that the government continues to carry out. We've been seeing some of the top officials, such as the Minister Diosdado Cabello, such as Deputy Celia Flores, welcoming those young boys and girls, very young in many cases. We've heard of cases of kids separated from their families as young as 6 months old. We were looking at the images just minutes ago of very, very young boys and girls who had come in this plane and were now about to be reunited with their families. So we continue looking at the images of this rally that is underway, the Freedom Rally, a demonstration that continues to demand the return of all those men and women who continue to be kidnapped, illegally detained abroad, and in particular the return of all the children that Venezuela continues to demand, that Venezuela seeks to repatriate, that Venezuela seeks to reunite with their family members that have been waiting in Venezuelan territories for these boys and girls to come back. Earlier today, one of the flights brought back over 250 Venezuelan nationals, according to the numbers that were given by the Venezuelan authorities at the time. Of course, these numbers, as they were saying also at the moment, always need to be rechecked because of the misinformation or irregularities in the information sent by the United States. Let's recall that the plane that arrived came from Texas, United States, to the Simón Bolívar Airport in La Guaira. And in that flight, with 250 nationals, came 7 children. 7 of those over 30 that continue to be kidnapped, that Venezuela demands be brought back in this continuous claim and popular demand that is at this moment being reinforced or underscored by this rally that we are looking with images on the screen. This Friday is a moment of joy. This return is a motive for joy, for happiness. Those were the words of the Ministry of the Interior, Justice and Peace, Diosdado Cabello, one of the Venezuelan top officials that have personally followed and received many of the planes that have brought back Venezuelan men, women, and children in these latest editions of the different return to the homeland flights. And while he highlighted that it was a moment of joy, it was a Friday in which 7 families were about to be reunited, 7 families were about to celebrate and spend a weekend together. This does not mean that the denunciation ends. This does not mean that the constant claim and constant demand for every child to be brought back ends. Quite the contrary, it continues with even more force. That is what we are seeing on screen. Just one of the mobilizations, one of the popular demonstrations that are at this moment demanding and asking in the streets, in the Venezuelan way, for these kids to be brought back. Let's recall that 2 of the most important demands that Venezuela is continuing to push forward in the international arena is for the return of the kids that are currently kidnapped and separated from their family members. 7 of them who returned today on an earlier flight. And also the return of the 252 Venezuelan men and women who are currently being illegally detained in El Salvador. Let's recall that through an agreement that attempts against the rights of migrants in general and Venezuelan migrants in particular, an agreement carried out by the U.S. administration with the Salvadoran government of Nayib Bukele, El Salvador accepted to receive migrants that the U.S. was willing to deport, in many cases disregarding law orders, disregarding denunciations of irregularities, with false accusations and false evidence. In many cases, who had no wrongdoing or criminal record and were only being targeted for being migrants, and in this case Venezuelan migrants. And El Salvador accepted to receive this illegally detained people in their centers, prisons that have been denounced for years for their inhumane treatments, prisons that have been receiving constant denunciations by human rights organizations like the SECOT Center, prisons that have been described as concentration camp-like situations. That is where the United States agreed to deport following no line of the international law. And that is why Venezuela continues to insist in the international arena and also in the face of all human rights organizations and international actors, in the context of which Venezuela has also denounced the complicit silence of many human rights actors in the international arena that the country deemed work only in favor of protecting the interest of Central Western powers, but have failed to, for example, denounce the situation, the irregular, the illegal situation of the 250 Venezuelans illegally sent to El Salvador and detained in a Central American country to this moment, while Venezuela continues every day to demand for their return. That is why also the government officials are waiting for every migrant that comes back on a return to the homeland flight. It is a symbol of the government being willing to receive them, of the government authorities being willing to accompany that process of their return and meeting every need and every legal procedure as the Venezuelan law dictates. We were looking at an earlier flight we were mentioning before. Apparently 251 was the number of nationals mentioned by the Minister Diosdado Cabello, 7 of them children. We saw the images of them arriving and being greeted by Minister Diosdado Cabello and also National Assembly Deputy Cilia Flores. They are now on their way to being reunited with their families, and what we're looking at right now is one of the rallies that are taking place at this moment in Venezuela, in Caracas, the capital specifically, as the people are awaiting for the return of these kids, as the people are continuing to demand from the streets of Venezuela to the international community that they put pressure on these international actors and on the U.S. administration in particular to allow for the return of those kids kidnapped in the United States, of those Venezuelan men and women detained in El Salvador. We continue to look at images from the rally in the streets of Caracas as Venezuela continues to demand for this return. Let's recall that the Back to the Homeland plan was installed by the President of the Republic of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro, in the year 2018. And it entered this new stage after negotiations with the special envoy of Donald Trump, Richard Grenell, in Venezuela, that have relaunched a series of flights, in particular to carry out this goal of the government led by President Nicolás Maduro of bringing every last Venezuelan national that seeks to and wants to come back to the homeland and is at the moment being targeted by the administration of the U.S. that has increased persecution, increased illegal deportations of migrants from across the world. At this moment, over 8,000 Venezuelans from February of this year until this moment have been able to return to their homeland. And in that context, we see the march that is unfolding continue, the march of Venezuelans in Caracas, in different points of the city and different points of the country. For example, in the José Martí Square of Chacaito, in the Venezuelan capital, the Venezuelan people have mobilized to demand the freedom and the return of these kids that have been kidnapped in the United States to Venezuela. Also, Caracas government chief Naum Fernandez highlighted that the President Nicolás Maduro has managed for the Venezuelan people many motives of joy, making reference to the return of 7 migrant children this July 18th that were until now being kidnapped in U.S. territory. In the sense, he also added, we're talking about the chief of Caracas, he added that with these actions, it was demonstrated that Venezuela has a serious, responsible, and defense of the human rights government. We were looking at these images from Venezuela with the different rallies that are underway at this moment as the people, the Venezuelan people, continue to demand for these children, these boys and girls at this moment kidnapped in the U.S. to return home, as these 7 kids have already returned home in a government plan just minutes ago. We will continue giving you all the information, so stay tuned with teleSUR English.